Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide. Today's topic, the Doodler murders and the systemic failure that let a killer walk free.
It's um it's one of those cases that really sticks with you. When you delve into true crime history, it's genuinely rare to find a situation like this,
Right.
where authorities pretty much knew who their guy likely was, they had the victims identified, the pattern was clear,
hmm
and yet he just vanished back into the everyday world, never faced justice.
It's horrifying and incredibly frustrating to look back on.
That's the chilling core of the Doodler case, really.
Absolutely. So today we're diving deep into San Francisco, specifically the mid-1970s, a place and time that on the surface seemed like this beacon of hope, of liberation, particularly for the gay community.
The Castro was becoming the Castro we know.
Exactly.
Uh,
But beneath that surface, it became a hunting ground for, well, for a phantom, an unidentified serial killer who stalked the city's gay men.
and the numbers are.
hmm
They're debated, which is part of the mystery, isn't it? We have a confirmed minimum of 6 murders.
6 confirmed.
But police at the time suspected maybe as many as 16 victims. Plus, we know for sure there were 3 other men who were brutally attacked but survived.
And this all happened in a terrifyingly short window, just about 20 months, between January 1974 and September 1975. A really intense period of fear.
And the name itself, the Doodler, it sounds almost childish, benign even.
It does. It's unsettling because of that.
Right. It wasn't some monster in the shadows in the typical sense. This killer's method was disturbingly intimate. He used art, these quick sketches, these doodles, as his way in.
As a lure,
Precisely. Sources describe it as a really effective form of, well, flirting almost. A way to communicate, build trust, seem harmless. He'd sketch someone, get them
you
talking.
can feel seen, maybe, special.
Yeah, could be. And then he'd lead them somewhere private, secluded. And that's when the friendly artist persona vanished and the night came out, stabbing them repeatedly.
So our mission today in this deep dive is really twofold. First, we want to trace that path of terror, map out the confirmed victims, the locations, the timeline.
Understand the pattern of violence itself.
Yes. And second, maybe even more importantly, we need to dissect why this happened. Why did one of the city's most prolific killers just walk away, even when police had a prime suspect?
And that means getting into the historical context. It's unavoidable. We have to look at the collision of emerging gay rights, the deeply ingrained institutional homophobia, especially within law enforcement.
And how that created a system where victims were silenced and a killer found refuge in that silence. This isn't really a story about a criminal genius outsmarting everyone.
No, not at all. It's a story about how societal prejudice, fear, and systemic failure essentially gave a killer a free pass. Fear became his shield.
Let's start there then, with that paradox of 1970 San Francisco, a sanctuary, but also a target.
It's absolutely crucial context. By the early 70s, San Francisco had this global reputation, didn't it? It was the place to go.
The promised land for LGBTQ people.
Right. After Stonewall, the gay liberation movement was gaining momentum, and San Francisco seemed to embody that promise. People flocked there seeking legitimacy, seeking respect, seeking the freedom to just be openly.
You saw these vibrant communities really taking root. The Castro, obviously, but also places like North Beach, the Polk Gulch area. There was a real energy.
But that very visibility, that growing confidence, it was happening against a backdrop of intense official hostility. The institution meant to protect citizens, the SFPD, was still operating with a very conservative, frankly anti-gay mindset.
The violence stats from that era are just staggering when you focus on the LGBTQ community. You mentioned sources citing 129 queer people murdered in San Francisco in 1974 alone.
And 131 the next year, 1975.
That's almost one person every other day in one city targeting one community. It paints a picture of a war zone almost.
It does, and it speaks volumes about the climate of fear, because that violence wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was enabled in part by the relationship between the community and the police.
Which was defined by hostility and deep mistrust.
Absolutely. Police policy back then actively worked against hiring gay officers. They'd use vague reasons like bad moral character to keep them out.
So the prejudice was baked right into the system.
Right from the hiring process. And that attitude filtered down to street level. We're talking frequent, aggressive raids on gay bars and bathhouses, often just for harassment purposes.
Random street stops, verbal abuse, physical beatings. Public humiliation was a tactic, too. Being arrested and having your name and address published in the paper as someone caught in a vice raid.
It was systemic antagonism. designed to keep the community marginalized and afraid.
And think about the practical effect of that. If you're part of that community and you become a victim of a crime, maybe you get mugged leaving a bar or assaulted, who do you turn to?
Exactly. Reporting it to the police often felt like putting yourself in more danger. You risk being harassed by the officers themselves, maybe arrested on some trumped-up charge, or at the very least being publicly outed against your will.
Which back then could mean losing everything. Your job, your apartment, your family.
There's a really stark example of this,
Yeah.
documented at the time. A gay man pulled over for a minor traffic thing, just a ticket. Should have been routine.
Okay.
Instead, 2 officers beat him severely, to the point where the city later settled with him out of court for a significant amount of money, 6 figures, reportedly.
Wow. So the city acknowledged the wrongdoing.
They did, financially.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial part. The victim pressed no criminal charges against the officers who assaulted him
Why not?
because the cost was too high. The fear of antagonizing the police further, of having his life dragged through the mud, of being publicly labeled, was paralyzing. He took the settlement and stayed silent.
That silence. That's the key, isn't it? That's the environment that Doodler stepped into.
Precisely. He wasn't just hunting individuals. He was hunting within a community that had been systematically intimidated into silence, a community taught that the authorities were not their protectors, but potentially another threat.
Okay, so with that chilling backdrop established, let's pivot to the killer himself. What did the police know or learn about the Doodler's profile, based on survivors on the crime scenes?
The description that emerged was pretty consistent. Witnesses and the few survivors described a black man.
Okay.
Age range usually given as 19 to maybe 25 years old. Relatively tall, around 6 feet, and with a slender build.
And you mentioned earlier police sometimes used a specific internal label.
Yes, in some reports and discussions, he was referred to as the Black Doodler, which is interesting because all his confirmed victims were white men.
That adds another layer, doesn't it? Potential racial dynamics intersecting with the targeting of gay men.
It does, and his hunting grounds were specific too. He frequented gay nightclubs, bars, restaurants, places where he could easily approach men. We know one specific spot mentioned was an all-night diner called the Truck Stop on Market Street.
A place you could hang out late, maybe meet someone casually?
Exactly. And after making contact, he'd lure them away. The kill sites were almost always secluded, often remote parts of city parks. Ocean Beach and Golden Gate Park feature repeatedly.
Suggesting he needed privacy, needed time for the encounter and the murder itself. He wasn't attacking them in public view?
No. Which brings us back to that sketching MO, the doodling.
How did that work exactly? Did he carry a sketchbook?
Apparently so. He'd approach men, sometimes claiming to be a cartoonist, other times saying he was a commercial art student. He'd offer to draw a quick portrait.
Which is quite an intimate thing, isn't it, to have someone draw you?
Incredibly intimate. Think about it. You have to sit still, make eye contact, give that person your focused attention. It creates an immediate, if artificial, connection, a sense of being seen, like you said.
It bypasses usual defenses. It's not just a pickup line, it's an interaction.
Exactly. One source called it a highly effective act of flirting and communication. It built trust rapidly, made him seem non-threatening, maybe even sensitive or artistic.
And then he'd suggest going somewhere more private, maybe back to their place or his, or just for a walk.
Presumably under the pretense of continuing the conversation, or for a sexual encounter. He used that trust, built through the sketching, to get them isolated.
The manipulation is just profound. Using art, something creative and connecting, as a prelude to extreme violence.
And the violence was extreme. As we said, stabbing. Not just once or twice.
Multiple times.
Multiple times, front and back, frenzied. Overkill in many cases.
Yeah.
It speaks to a tremendous amount of rage.
And you mentioned stabbing is somewhat unique for serial killers in this context.
Statistically, yes. In same-sex homicides from that era, things like blunt force trauma or strangulation were more common. Guns, too. Stabbing ranks fourth.
Why is that significant, do you think?
Well, using a knife, it requires getting extremely close. It's intensely personal. It's messy. It's physical. It requires a level of direct engagement with the act of killing that's different from, say, shooting someone from a distance.
It suggests something about the killer's psychology.
Possibly. It points towards maybe a very immediate, overwhelming release of rage, perhaps tied to internal conflicts about his own identity, his own desires. The violence wasn't just instrumental, about silencing the victim. It felt expressive, almost ritualistic in its intensity. That up-close, brutal contact seems central.
Let's trace that brutal contact through the confirmed victims. It began early in 1974, didn't it?
Yes, January 27th, 1974.
Yeah.
Just before 2 a.m. The body of Gerald Earl Kavanaugh was found.
Kavanaugh, he was 49.
49, yes. A Canadian-American immigrant, worked as a furniture finisher. His body was discovered right at the water's edge at Ocean Beach.
Ocean Beach. That location comes up again and again.
It does. Very isolated, especially late at night. The tide was actually coming in, threatening to wash his body away.
Was he? How was he found?
Fully clothed, lying face up. But he'd been stabbed repeatedly. Some reports mention as many as 16 stab wounds.
16.
And crucially, the coroner noted defensive wounds on his left pinky finger, clear signs that he fought back, that he resisted his attacker.
He knew what was happening.
He must have, at some point. And another detail, his wallet, his identification, it was missing. Removed by the killer.
So initially he was unidentified.
For a while, yes. He was tagged John Doe #7, and the police report included a detail that, while seemingly factual, hinted at the underlying biases. It noted he was never married.
A sort of coded way of suggesting his likely sexual orientation back then.
Exactly. Already framing the victim through that lens, rather than focusing solely on the violence inflicted upon him.
The pattern then continued a few months later in June 74.
June 25th, 1974. The second confirmed victim was Joseph Stevens, known professionally as J. Stevens.
J. Stevens, I recognize that name. He was involved in the drag scene, wasn't he?
He was. A rising star, really, only 27 years old. A talented female impersonator and comedian. He just secured a really good gig for the summer at Finocchio's, a famous club in North Beach. A lot of potential.
Such a tragedy. Where was he found?
His body was discovered in Golden Gate Park, near Spreckles Lake, hidden among some bushes.
Golden Gate Park. Another recurring location.
Yes. He'd been stabbed 5 times, with severe wounds to his lungs. Investigators believed his death wasn't instantaneous.
How did they determine that?
Well, he was last seen leaving the cabaret club earlier that night. His own car was found abandoned near where his body was discovered in the park.
Ah, so the implication is he drove himself and his killer there. Willingly.
That's the strong suggestion. He wasn't abducted. He went there under his own power, likely thinking it was a consensual encounter or a private conversation.
And was there evidence of a struggle at that scene, too?
Yes, definitely. Police found drag marks in the dirt and grass about 10 feet away from where his body ultimately lay. It suggests the attack started, Stevens fought or tried to flee, and was then dragged or fell into the bushes where he died.
A picture of trust betrayed, followed by a desperate fight for life. Just horrible.
And then the violence escalated. Dramatically. Less than 2 weeks later.
July 7th, 1974.
Right. Klaus Achim Christmann, usually known as Klaus. He was 31, a German-American immigrant, found back at Ocean Beach, like Kavanaugh.
What made this one escalate?
The sheer viciousness of the attack. It shocked even seasoned homicide detectives. Christmann had significantly more stab wounds than Kavanaugh or Stevens, but the wounds to his throat.
What about them?
They were severe, multiple deep slashes. One investigator at the scene actually described it as looking like an attempted decapitation.
Attempted decapitation.
Yeah.
That speaks to a different level of frenzy, doesn't it? Pure rage, maybe losing control.
Utterly savage. We have to remember the Zodiac killer had terrorized San Francisco just a few years earlier. Inspector David Toski, who worked that infamous case, was involved here too. And he reportedly said Christmann's murder was the most vicious stabbing he had ever seen in his career.
Coming from a Zodiac investigator, that's saying something.
It really is. It signals a terrifying escalation in the Doodler's brutality.
And again, did the victim's personal life become a focus for the police?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Christmann was married, had 2 children,
Yeah.
likely living a closeted life, but the police report made sure to highlight details found at the scene.
Like what?
He was found fully clothed, but his pants were unzipped. And in his pocket, they found a tube of face paint, makeup,
Which they interpreted how?
as evidence suggesting homosexual propensities, as they termed it. Again, this focus on proving the victim's perceived deviance, rather than purely analyzing the killer's actions and MO, it feels like a constant distraction in the early investigation.
Definitely. After Christmann, there seems to have been a gap in the confirmed murders for several months.
Yes, the killings seemed to pause, or at least no confirmed victims were linked to the Doodler for the rest of '74. Then the terror reignited in the spring of 1975.
May 12, 1975, victim number 4.
Frederick Elmer Capen. He was 32 years old, a registered nurse. And interestingly, he was also a highly decorated Vietnam War veteran.
Really? What kind of service?
He served as a medical corpsman in Vietnam and had actually received a commendation medal for his service. A genuine war hero.
And where was he found? Back at Ocean Beach.
Near Ocean Beach, yes,
Yeah.
behind some sand dunes. The cause of death was determined as stab wounds striking the aorta.
Any unusual details at that scene?
One thing Homicide noted was drag marks again. Similar to the Stevens case, it looked like Captain's body had been moved about 20 feet from where the initial attack likely occurred.
Suggesting a struggle or the killer repositioning the body afterwards?
Could be either or both. His identity was confirmed quickly because his fingerprints were on file, probably from his nursing license or military service.
Okay, so that's 4 confirmed victims by May 1975. Then there's a relatively recent addition to the list, right? Confirmed just a few years ago.
Yes, in 2022, the SFPD officially linked a fifth man to the Doodler's pattern, Warren Andrews.
Warren Andrews. Who was he?
Andrews was 52 years old, a bit older than some of the others, but still fitting the general profile. He was a lawyer, worked for the U.S. Postal Service.
And when was he attacked?
He was found unconscious back on April 27, 1975, so actually before Frederick Kaplan was found, chronologically.
Okay. Where was Andrews found?
At Land's End, which is a park area just north of Ocean Beach, still within that same geographical cluster.
And how was he attacked? Was it stabbing again?
This is where it differs slightly, which might be why it took longer to connect him officially. Andrews wasn't stabbed. He was severely beaten.
Beaten. With what?
Police determined he was attacked with a rock and a heavy tree branch found near the scene. Brutal, blunt force trauma.
But he fit the victimology otherwise.
Precisely. White male, likely gay, targeted in a secluded park area near the other Doodler crime scenes. The location and victim profile were a strong match.
Did he survive the attack initially?
He was found unconscious, barely alive. He lingered in a coma for 7 weeks before succumbing to his injuries, having never regained consciousness. So, his death became a homicide, clearly linked to that assault.
Adding him definitely solidifies that pattern of attacks in those specific park and beach areas.
It does. And it brings us to the final confirmed victim from that original 1970s cluster, Harold Goldberg.
Goldberg. When was he found?
His body was discovered on June 4th, 1975.
And who was he?
Harold Goldberg was 66 years old, a Swedish-American immigrant, significantly older than the other victims, which does introduce a slight inconsistency in the pattern.
66. Yeah, that's quite a jump from the others who were mostly in their 20s, 30s, or early 50s, like Andrews.
It is. He was found in Lincoln Park near the golf course there, also consistent geographically.
And the state of the body.
He was found in a pretty advanced state of decomposition. Police estimated he'd been dead for about 2 weeks before being discovered.
Hidden.
Yes, hidden quite well, actually, tucked away in what reports described as an igloo-like cove of brush and foliage.
Any other details from that scene? State of clothing?
His clothing was disturbed. Reports mention his underwear had been taken, and his pants were unzipped. Again, details hinting at a sexual motive or context, at least in the killer's actions.
So despite the age difference, the location, the manner of concealment, and the disturbed clothing still pointed toward the Doodler pattern.
Yes, he remains the last officially confirmed victim linked to that initial terrifying spree ending in mid-1975.
Okay, so we have this trail of at least 6 confirmed deaths, plus the survivors. This is where the story takes such a frustrating, almost unbelievable turn. Because the police actually got close. They had a suspect.
They did. And relatively quickly after that last confirmed murder of Goldberg. The irony is just staggering.
How did they identify him?
Well, in October 1975, so just about 5 months after Goldberg was found, the police took a crucial step. They released a composite sketch of the suspect to the public.
Based on descriptions from
the survivors, primarily. The sketch depicted the young, slender, black man witnesses had described.
And did the sketch work? Did it generate leads?
It generated the lead. Almost immediately after the sketch was published, an anonymous woman called the police department.
An anonymous tip.
Yes. And she didn't just offer vague information, she gave them a specific name and a license plate number for a car associated with that person.
Wow, that's incredibly specific. Did they follow up?
They did. They identified the man the caller named, and they brought him in for questioning.
And what did they find out about him? Did he fit the profile?
He fit the physical description. And more than that, investigators learned he had a history. He was reportedly known to have, quote, mental difficulties involving sex.
Okay.
And he was apparently receiving psychiatric treatment on an outpatient basis at the time.
So potential psychological factors aligning with the brutality of the crimes.
It certainly seemed plausible. But the police didn't just rely on the suspect's own statements or lack thereof. They took another step.
What was that?
They went to his psychiatrist.
Whoa, can they even do that? Patient confidentiality?
Legally, it's incredibly complex, then and now. But according to the sources we have, the police did speak with the suspect's psychiatrist. And this is where it gets truly explosive. The psychiatrist allegedly admitted something stunning.
What?
Allegedly, the psychiatrist confirmed that his patient, the suspect the police were interviewing, had confessed to the Doodler killings during their therapy sessions.
He confessed to his psychiatrist.
That's the reported claim. Now imagine you're the police. You have a suspect matching the description, linked by a tipster, known mental health issues related to sex, and now, potentially, a secondhand confession via his therapist.
That sounds like a slam dunk case almost.
You'd think so. And it aligns perfectly with the psychology we discussed. Remember that chilling quote, one of the survivors reported hearing from the attacker.
All you guys are alike.
Exactly. That phrase just screams internal conflict, maybe self-loathing related to his own sexuality projected outwards as rage onto his victims. It fits the profile of someone potentially confessing these acts in therapy, grappling with immense internal turmoil.
So they had a suspect, the profile fit, they even had this alleged confession. Why did they charge him? What stopped them?
This is the absolute crux of the systemic failure. They hit a brick wall, a fatal roadblock. They couldn't proceed with criminal charges.
But why, if they had all that?
Because they needed testimony. Specifically, they needed the surviving victim to testify in court, to identify the suspect as their attacker.
The 3 men who were assaulted but lived.
Yes. And all 3 of them, despite identifying the suspect to the police privately, absolutely refused to testify publicly in court.
All 3.
All 3.
Let's talk about those survivors again. Who were they, as far as we know?
We know a few details. One was described as a foreign diplomat. He'd been attacked in his own apartment, stabbed 6 times, but managed to fight his way out or escape.
A diplomat. So, high profile, potential international incident if his identity became public.
Immense pressure there. The second survivor was described even more vaguely, but significantly, as a well-known entertainer.
An entertainer. Any names ever surface, even as rumors.
The rumors at the time were huge, actually. Speculation ran rampant, focusing on major Hollywood actors known to frequent San Francisco or suspected of being closeted. Names like Rock Hudson or Richard Chamberlain were whispered about.
Wow. Whether true or not, the fear associated with a name like that being linked.
Exactly. For someone like that, a public outing wouldn't just be embarrassing, it would be career suicide. Total destruction of their public image, their livelihood.
And the third survivor.
Less is known about the third man, other than he also identified the suspect to police, but then simply refused to cooperate further. Wouldn't even answer police calls after that initial identification. He just shut down.
So the reason they wouldn't testify? It boils down to the fear of being outed.
Overwhelmingly, yes. You have to transport yourself back to 1975, 76. Even in San Francisco, which felt like a haven, the societal condemnation of homosexuality was still incredibly powerful.
For men in positions like a diplomat or a famous entertainer, or even just someone with a family or a regular job they wanted to keep.
Coming out publicly, especially under the glare of a murder trial involving gay cruising spots, meant almost certain ruin. Losing your family, your friends, your career, your entire social standing. Maybe even facing legal repercussions in some contexts or blackmail.
The risk was astronomical.
It was. And this immense pressure, this impossible choice forced upon the survivors, it wasn't lost on community leaders at the time. Harvey Milk, who was becoming a powerful voice for gay rights in the city even before he was elected supervisor.
What did Milt say about it?
He actually publicly defended their silence. He said, quote, "I understand their position. I respect the pressure society has put on them." He didn't condemn them for not testifying. He condemned the society that made testifying impossible.
He recognized the systemic issue.
He did. He pointed out that probably a quarter of the gay men in San Francisco were still deeply closeted, living in fear of exposure. The Doodler survivors were trapped by that same fear.
So the killer wasn't protected by his own cleverness. He was protected by homophobia.
That's exactly it. The institutionalized prejudice, the societal hatred, it functioned as the perfect shield for the Doodler. The police felt strongly they had their man. This suspect, by the way, cooperated during the interview, seemed calm but never admitted anything directly to them.
Of course not.
Without the survivors willing to take the stand, the district attorney felt there wasn't enough evidence to secure a conviction. No eyewitness testimony linking him directly to the attacks.
So they had to let him go.
They had no choice under the legal constraint. He was never publicly named, never charged, never tried, never convicted.
And the killings, did they continue after he was interviewed?
That's perhaps the most damning circumstantial evidence. After the police interviewed this specific suspect in January 1976, the Doodler murders stopped completely,
Just so.
vanished. He melted back into the city, shielded by the very fear he exploited.
It's just infuriating, knowing they were that close.
It really is. And it highlights how the Doodler wasn't operating in isolation. His crimes were interwoven with this much larger, complex web of violence and fear affecting the entire community.
Right. It wasn't just the Doodler out there, was it? We mentioned those high murder stats.
Exactly. And even within the SFPD, among the detectives working these cases, there's a strong feeling that the official Doodler count, those 5 or 6 confirmed victims, was likely a significant underestimation.
They suspected he killed more.
Much more, potentially. As we noted, some speculated maybe as many as 14 victims could be attributed to him. There's that quote from one detective basically saying, anyone claiming it was only 5 or 6 without an indictment was fooling themselves.
Suggesting they knew, internally, that other unsolved cases probably belonged to him.
Or at least that the lines were blurry. Part of the problem was the police department's own limited understanding of the diverse gay subcultures in the city at the time. It led to a kind of investigative tunnel vision.
How so?
They struggled to make sense of the different scenes. Were they looking for one killer driven by hatred of all gay men? Or were there multiple killers operating within specific niches, like the S&M or leather scene? They kept trying to categorize things neatly.
Trying to impose order on chaos they didn't fully grasp.
Right. By 1976, they'd sort of formally divided about 17 unsolved murders of gay men into 3 main categories, hoping to make sense of it all.
What were those categories again?
First, there were the Folsom cases. These were linked to victims involved in the leather and S&M scene, mostly found in the South of Market, Soma area.
Okay, geographically distinct.
Second, they had the Tenderloin slasher. This killer was believed to be targeting victims in the Tenderloin neighborhood, often drag queens or transgender individuals, and people of color.
Another distinct profile and location.
And third, there was the Black Doodler. His profile was the white male victims, often met in the Castro or nearby, killed in parks, with that specific sketching MO.
So 3 neat boxes: leather Soma, Tenderloin drag, Doodler Castro Parks.
That was the theory, but the reality when you look closely at the details was much more fluid and overlapping. The Doodler didn't stick neatly inside his assigned box.
How did he cross the lines?
Well, for starters, we know he sometimes met potential victims in the Tenderloin, like at that diner, the truck stop, even though his confirmed kill sites were miles away near Ocean Beach or Golden Gate Park. So his cruising ground overlapped with the Tenderloin slasher territory.
Okay, geographically messy.
And then there's the attack on the survivor, the diplomat. That happened in his apartment in the Fox Plaza building.
Fox Plaza. Where's that located?
It's much closer to the Civic Center, Tenderloin, and Soma areas.
Oh!
Significantly far from the isolated beach and park locations where the bodies were usually found. That attack site breaks the geographical pattern.
So he was adaptable, or maybe less predictable than they assumed.
Exactly. Which brings us to another specific case that highlights this potential overlap and the danger of rigid categorization.
Yeah.
The murder of George Gilbert.
George Gilbert. Who was he?
Gilbert was a lawyer, described as handsome, blonde. He was murdered in September 1974, right in the middle of the Doodler's initial spree.
Okay. And how was he killed?
He was stabbed 7 times, specifically in the lower abdomen. And where was he killed? In his apartment at Fox Plaza.
Fox Plaza again. Same building as the Diplomat survivor attack.
Or certainly in that immediate vicinity associated with that high-rise complex. Now, Gilbert was known to be involved in the S&M leather scene, at least peripherally,
So the police categorized his murder.
as one of the Folsom S&M cases. They put him in that box, separate from the Doodler investigation.
But stabbed multiple times in an apartment near where a known Doodler survivor was attacked. The MO seems to overlap significantly, doesn't it?
It really does. If the Doodler was evolving his methods, perhaps moving from isolated outdoor locations to attacking victims in their own apartments, as the Diplomat attack suggests, then maybe Gilbert was actually a Doodler victim too.
And by rigidly separating the cases based on perceived subculture, leather scene versus Castro scene, the police might have missed crucial connections, forensic links.
It's a very real possibility. That tunnel vision, fueled by a lack of understanding and maybe some prejudice about the different scenes, could have hampered the investigation significantly.
And that prejudice, it wasn't just about categories, was it? It went deeper, right to the core of how they viewed the victims
Oh,
themselves.
absolutely. The institutional bias was palpable. We have those chilling quotes from Dr. Boyd Stevens, the coroner, who handled some of the early Doodler victims.
Remind us what he said. It's pretty shocking.
He made public statements asserting things like, quote, bizarre violence is the rule rather than the exception in gay slayings.
As if extreme violence was just normal for gay people.
That was the implication. And he went further, stating that gay men, quote, have emotional problems to start with.
Emotional problems to start
Yeah.
with. That's appalling, especially coming from the coroner.
It's horrifying. And you have to remember the timing. This wasn't the 1950s. This was the mid-1970s. It was only 4 years after the American Psychological Association had officially removed homosexuality from its list of mental illnesses.
So the official medical and scientific consensus was shifting, but people like the coroner were still operating under this deeply ingrained belief that being gay was inherently deviant or pathological.
Exactly. His comments reflect that institutional mindset. If you believe the victims themselves are somehow inherently disordered or prone to bizarre lives, it makes it much easier to dismiss the patterns, to not investigate as thoroughly, perhaps.
To see their murders less as the work of a calculating serial predator targeting a specific community, and more as just the unfortunate, maybe even expected outcome of their lifestyle?
Precisely. It subtly dehumanizes the victims and potentially lowers the investigative priority. It made it harder to see the connections, like the potential link between George Gilbert and the Doodler, because they were mentally filed away in different boxes based on prejudice as much as evidence.
It created blind spots that the killer could easily exploit.
Tragically, yes. It made the victims seem less worthy of protection and ultimately less worthy of justice.
It's just incredible how all these factors of the fear, the prejudice, the institutional failures align to allow this to happen, which makes the fact that the case is now being actively reinvestigated almost half a century later even more remarkable.
It is. Since around 2018, the SFPD homicide detail, investigators like Dan Cunningham, have really put fresh eyes and, more importantly, modern technology onto the Doodler case.
And the big hope now revolves around DNA.
Absolutely. That's the game changer. We know that biological evidence was collected from at least 2 of the original crime scenes back in the 70s, specifically blood samples.
Blood, not semen.
Correct. Which apparently limits some of the newest forensic genealogy techniques slightly, but blood still contains DNA, a unique genetic fingerprint. Those samples have been preserved and sent for modern DNA analysis.
So there's a real chance of developing a genetic profile of the killer.
That's the hope. It's why investigators today sound cautiously optimistic. They've stated they believe the case is solvable.
Because the DNA exists, and also because people who knew something back then might still be alive.
Exactly. Memories fade, but maybe allegiances shift over time. People who were afraid to talk then might be willing now. The police are using everything in their modern toolkit.
Including updated sketches.
Yes, they released age progression sketches, showing what the suspect from the 1970s might look like today, likely in his early 60s or older, trying to jog someone's memory.
And they've increased the reward money significantly too, haven't they?
They have. The reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction has been raised substantially, fluctuating in reports, but reaching as high as $200,000 or even $250,000.
That's a serious incentive for someone to finally come forward.
It is. They're hoping it might be enough to break that wall of silence that has protected the killer for decades.
And what's truly fascinating and also deeply unsettling is that the focus of this renewed investigation, it hasn't shifted, has it?
No. Amazingly, the primary person of interest today is the same man the police identified and interviewed back in 1976.
The man whose psychiatrist allegedly heard a confession.
That same man. Despite the decades that have passed, the core evidence trail still points towards him. He has reportedly been interviewed again by cold case detectives.
Still denying involvement, presumably.
Presumably. But the fact that he remains the focus after all this time speaks volumes about the strength of that original, albeit unprosecuted, case against him.
And are police still looking for anyone else connected to that original investigation?
Yes. Critically, they are still actively trying to identify and locate the anonymous woman who made that phone call back in October 1975.
The one who gave the suspect's name and license plate.
Exactly. She cracked the case open back then. Police believe she might have more information, maybe context about how she knew what she knew, or even details about that alleged confession to the psychiatrist. Finding her could be another key.
It all comes back to trying to finally close this case, not just for the historical record, but for the families of the victims.
Absolutely. The pain of these unsolved murders doesn't just fade away. It echoes through families for generations. You mentioned Jay Stevens, the performer.
Yes, his sister, Melissa Stevens Honrath, spoke about the impact his murder had.
She described him so poignantly. She said, he was like a thread through all of us that was just joy, and his loss just destroyed everything. That's the human cost of this killer walking free. Generations of grief.
Destroyed everything. That really lands.
It does. And it underscores why solving this isn't just about identifying a killer. It's about trying to mend, however belatedly, some of that destruction.
It really puts the whole story into perspective. The Doodler murders aren't just another cold case file.
No, they're a stark lesson. A monument, really, to the deadly consequences when societal prejudice intersects with criminal predation. The investigation failed, fundamentally, not because the killer was exceptionally brilliant or elusive.
But because the system itself, the society he operated in, effectively criminalized his victims and shielded him through their silence and fear.
The system, in a way, gave the Doodler immunity. The homophobia was his unwitting accomplice.
It's a chilling thought. The man with the knife was dangerous, obviously, but the fear of exposure, the fear instilled by society, was arguably just as powerful a weapon in this story.
It really was. And that leads us to the provocative thought, the question that lingers long after you study this case. The fact that a serial killer was essentially known to police, identified, interviewed, and yet walked free. It forces you to ask,
What's the question?
when a government, when its institutions like the police, not only fail to protect a specific group within its population, but actively contribute to the fear and silence that prevents them from seeking justice, does that failure, that systemic neglect and hostility, become a form of complicity in the crimes themselves?
Does the system become an accomplice? Wow.
It's a heavy question about institutional accountability,
Yeah.
about what happens when the shield fails, or worse, when it becomes part of the threat. And nearly 50 years later, for the victims of the Doodler and their families, that question still hangs unanswered.
That is a deeply provocative thought to leave with, especially considering the tangible power that fear wielded throughout this entire tragic saga. The ultimate cost was just devastatingly high.
Indeed. The scars left by that era's prejudice were deep and, in this case, undeniably fatal.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.